I'm going to bring up to the stage the great Rick Linklater. Thanks, guys. Okay, in that spirit, we're going to keep it really short tonight, but let's all settle in for this amazing film. You know, actually, when I first saw this, there was a 145-minute version that was going around. Initially, it was a German, I think it was financed by TV, and there were various versions over the years, but it seems like Wolfgang Petersen has settled in on this as the version, but I think there was even a longer one that was on television and stuff. So I've never seen this one. So, but let's all just settle in and watch this exciting action thriller war movie. You know, at the time, in '82 when this came out, it was kind of like, there's a great German World War II movie. And I remember people kind of, what the hell would that be? You know, how could, you know, what is that? And I remember at the very beginning, there's a scroll that says, you know, these U-boat, the whole thing's this U-boat mission. It's just one mission. And there's some stats about how many of these soldiers went off and how many didn't come back. You know, it was very dangerous what these guys are doing. Some high percentage of mortality in what these guys are doing. And American audiences, on first blush, when they saw this, they applauded. And that's a different generation. The war was only 25 years old. A lot of fresh, you know, like, yeah, we don't want these German guys to come back. But I think it's the power of cinema identification and just the just how great this movie is. It goes out of its way to make sure these guys aren't the frothing Nazis, which is historically accurate. I read up, and the U-boat teams were a lot less political. They were less likely to be party members and all that. So it's the classic war story. These guys are the kind of the grunts, and they make a little fun of the Hitler Youth, and that's all coming from on high. So I think Americans really embrace this film just for you can care about anyone in these precarious situations, but it's the power of cinema. You know, Truffaut said, you can't make an anti-war movie. It's impossible, because they're usually too exciting. You know, so it perpetuates war and then more war movies. It's a bad cycle. So I've been thinking about war movies a lot lately. So it'll be very interesting to see this film. And we're going to be up after, briefly, for those who are still with us, to let's talk about war movies, and this movie in particular, because it's amazing. It's an amazing achievement, and it blew everyone's mind, and it's still blowing everyone's mind. It's about to blow our mind tonight. So, all right, let's get going.
It's real good.
It's good, and I like the longer version. I was a little worried for a second, but they're always better. You know, you see this a lot, like Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage. The U.S. theatrical version is, 3 hours, but it was a 5-hour miniseries when you watch the 5 hours. Same with Fanning Alexander, and this is in that category too. Mm-hmm. You know, it's conceived of as a long work, and it must be frustrating when you hear, a much shorter version came out. Everyone loved it, Mm-hmm. I mean, this film got it's unheard of for a international title, particularly a German one, to get 6 Academy Award nominations. I mean, it's just a fucking good movie,
Yeah.
At that time, it really blew people away, So it still works. I mean, it's something about the internationalist, borderlessness of war movies.
Yeah. It's weird because when you look at the Academy Award nominations, it's not nominated Best Foreign Film. It's just nominated Best Picture, Best Director,
editing, all everything. The cinematography. Make great use. This is early Steadicam years. This is like the second or third year of the Steadicam. It's right up there with one of the best Steadicam movies. It'd be a different movie.
Yeah, I think like camera operators probably look at this as being like, that's as good as it gets,
Yeah, just the detail, and even just that claustrophobia, just how every background, it's just so well staged, coordinated. And Petersen was I guess at this point he's made a couple movies. He's so different than like Fassbinder or Herzog, this kind of action thriller.
He'd made a bunch of movies
dramatic.
At this point, yeah. But the real commercial movies.
Yeah, he's kind of a genre guy, and just kind of pulls this out of nowhere. And this is by far like the biggest German production, I think, ever, maybe up to that point, or one of the biggest German films. They got it all together, all these TV stations, and they did it.
Yeah, it's like you look at it, and it's like the shooting schedule must have been like a year.
Yeah, well, purposefully. I mean, those guys, the hair, the that's real. They're aging and.
Do you know what the actual shooting schedule was?
I think it was a year.
Like a year.
Yeah,
really?
I think they lived together. They lived in those quarters. You can almost smell it, And that's not a good smell, really.
Yeah, it's amazing, just like the performances and the way they all go
Yeah,
together. It's
some
just
great faces, too. That's an interesting, or very effective, let's say, narrative method to have the lieutenant, Werner. He's got such an empathetic face. I really love that guy. But he's a journalist, right? So they're explaining things to him. And we see it through his eyes so much. He uses that reaction shot so much. He cuts, whenever anything's going on, you cut to Werner's face. Not only has he got that great face, but, it's just a good narrative storytelling device.
Yeah, it's awfully good. I wonder if we have any contributions from the audience. Right back here.
Did they shoot it on a soundstage, or where did they?
Yeah. Who knows? So I don't know that much about the production.
They basically built a submarine on a soundstage.
Yeah.
It was not open on the sides or anything. It was a long tube.
Right.
And the scenes during the depth charging, they didn't shake the camera. They shook the set. To get
Oh,
the
you can
effect.
tell.
Huh?
You can tell it's
Yeah.
set because it's just too well. You see gravity working too well. When it dumps them over and stuff. I believe that. Those things are 10 feet across. They're in a 10-foot.
Yeah.
10 feet.
Yeah, are there any people here who are like just subnuts, like just huge? How authentic is it? Does anybody know? I mean, it gives the appearance of like incredible authenticity. And
We've always heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, is it super authentic? Like that's like
Well,
down to like the size.
everyone
of the
seemed to
bolt?
think so, except the guy who wrote the book
Oh yeah,
that it's based on.
Mm-hmm.
Hans, whatever. He was a critic.
of this
came
movie.
out-
He was just like, it's fine.
Yeah. he was critical. He says you wouldn't have that many bolts blow out. He says one would be huge. You didn't need 5 or whatever. You didn't need, he thought they just overdid it.
Well, that's one where like
It's like, dude, you wrote the book. They're gonna make a movie out of it. What do you expect? So it's that kind of nitpicking. But he had been there. I think he was Werner.
wow.
I believe.
But as
and he also criticized it. What I was hinting at before the movie, he also criticized it because he saw it as just this extremely anti-war book he had written, and he felt it sort of glorified it, despite. I hope it's
It was great. I was
anti-war.
loving it and then despising all these guys right now who are wanting more war. That, it all went together.
But can those things go together?
What?
Well, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. And what's a good anti-war movie?
Cross of Iron.
Yeah, Cross of Iron. But House of Glory. There's so many. But
That was the effect on me anyway.
yeah, but
Paths of Glory.
there's something just weird in the psyche, particularly the male psyche, that war's horrible. It's just terrible. But damn it, we make wars. Wars make men, and I'm gonna go start one.
War's been going on
Or
a whole
worse,
lot
the
longer.
guys who never fought. That's my beef with wars and war movies. Like, if you haven't fought in a war, you shouldn't be able to start a war. And if you hadn't fought in a war, you shouldn't make a film about a war. But that would rule out so many leaders and so many, filmmakers for sure.
Right over here.
Yeah, I'm wondering if either of you have given any thought how this might be, in some ways, a story about the making of a movie. This experience on this sub is, the project of making a movie.
chief.
You have to just kind of ram it through,
This is a very common reading that you hear from almost every movie. It's like, clearly, this movie's clearly Wizard of Oz is a metaphor for the making of a movie. Clearly, you hear it about so many movies.
Well, itself, I hope most movies aren't that, but
But you can almost,
Like,
you really
yeah.
almost can read almost every movie like that if you look at it. But yeah, of course, you've got the chief.
Well, it's a
in
good
a military
narrative.
crew movie.
Most sports movies could be like, metaphors for making movies. You have a coach or, who stand-ins for the director.
Have you ever deliberately done that?
And then
Like
you have.
you've made movies about making a movie, kind of, sort of. But is it? Have you ever said, "Oh, this clearly you got this metaphor here within the movie"?
When you're in it, I think you're trying to tell that story, but I don't know. It's a lot. I'm sure it's a lot easier.
So what movie that
Making
you've
the
made was
movie
this
than being in
difficult?
war. I don't know if you can really capture it, you know? I think the guys who really, I read a biography of J.D. Salinger. There's a recent one out last year, and you know, that guy, he just went through hell and back. Like most of his comrades died in the war. He saw concentration camps, just the absolute worst World War II experience you can have. And he never wrote about it. He thought it couldn't be represented, nor should it. You know, I mean, he was clearly kind of shell-shocked, as they called it back then. But so this attempt to represent war is you can see it's so dramatic, you know, you kind of have to, but it seems problematic too. Born on the 4th of July. Have you seen that lately?
Catch-22.
That's a damn good. Yeah, I'm into the Catch-22, the MASH, you know, those are good war movies.
What are your
Strangelove
what are
is a
your-
good Cold War movie.
Like if you were to rank your like top 5 war movies or top 3 for purposes of time, what would they be?
You know a damn good war movie, and it's another German. There are a lot of, you know, it's the Cirques. It's from the German perspective, even though it's an American studio film. Strangely, Time to Love and A Time to Die. Have you seen that one? That's John Gavin plays a German soldier who meets a girl. He has a short pass, like a few-day pass. Meets a girl. It's kind of a love story, but. Great title. That was Fassbinder, one of his favorite war movies. Instead of live, time to die. Time to love and a time to die. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's tragic. You know, but it's kind of wonderful.
Watching this one reminds me a little bit of, although this is way more intense, of Howard Hawks' Air Force, which follows a bomber crew through like all this is similarly hellishly intense period.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many war movies. I mean, it's just such a staple in our history of. You know, the early films, we immediately were making war movies.
I hate war, but I really love war movies.
I know. I think that's a problem for us.
It really is.
Yeah, we all do. We're fucked up.
Nation's a war movie.
Yeah. What's that?
Birth of a Nation's a war movie.
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind.
Intolerance has a lot of war. I mean, early, right off the bat, the first narratives ever made. Well, because it's like storytelling. Can you get a more dramatic setup?
Yeah, it's true.
You know, regardless, and it's. They stack the deck, you know, like the guys you could judge for the war are never in the film. It's the guys that's, you know, floating downhill, you know, they're the ones suffering, they're the ones having to listen to orders. You think of Paths of Glory, Breaker Moran, often these kind of innocent people are being made to suffer from stupid, you know, decisions by those, that's how it always feels. You know, so it's a good narrative setup. They have your sympathy immediately. You don't go, well, why aren't you conscientiously objecting and just not being in the war?
You know, Rick, a lot of war stuff has been carefully documented, but will never see the light of day because it's all super secret stuff. You remember my friend Andy from London was a nuclear weapons officer on a submarine during the Cold War. And
so when you say documented, like,
well, they planted a listening device on a communications cable across some body of water, and Russia, you know, up above the Arctic Circle, and you know they were going in and monitoring this and maintaining this communications thing, you know, on a submarine. For quite a number of years, but and that's all well documented, but it's super secret, so it's never going to be in a movie.
The books have been written about it.
yeah,
I mean, just nobody wants to make the movie.
I don't know, it sounds kind of boring. We need a little blood and guts. We need more. We need bombers and.
He did tell me one story about being out in the middle of the Atlantic and somehow or another getting snarled in a bunch of cables that were floating out there, and they had one of these nights like.
You know, did anyone read the book? I was attempting to make a war movie once. Did you ever read Jarhead? It ended up I thought a really crappy movie, but it was kind of the non-war war movie. It was Desert Storm, where like what? It was a turkey shoot. There, you know, it was a war with one army basically. So few American casualties, and it was. it was kind of a joke. I mean, of a war, so that
Yeah,
you know the guys are so bored they're watching like Full Metal Jacket and Apocalypse Now. The soldiers are sitting in their barracks. I said that's funny. You know, it's like a non-war war movie. They get bored. Some guy shoots a camel at some point. You know, it was like MASH. It would be MASH for the first Iraq War. And I hadn't known this really comedy. You know, and damn it, I remember talking to the producers about it because I love that book, and I was like, "Oh, here's the take," and they just were like, "No," and they just made like every war movie ever made. You know, there's Jamie Foxx like steers and queers from it was just like the sergeant. It was like every war movie ever made, but for a war that didn't, it was a non-war kind of to such a large degree. It was so bizarre. People can't help themselves. They have to like jump in there and do everything they've seen before.
Yeah, I wish you would have made that one. Let's do.
Sorry to digress. I was just thinking of.
Let's do one
what I
last
consider a good
contribution,
war movie.
and then we got to wrap it up. But then we'll talk a little bit about
late.
Cutter's Way next week.
Yeah.
Right in the back here.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Robert E. Lee is supposed to have reviewed his troops one time, seen them in all their glory and finery the day before the battle, and he is supposed to have said, "It is well that war is so horrible, for we would grow to love it too much." I think that kind of encapsulates that whole argument about whether it's an anti-war or pro-war. It can be both at the same time.
And Sherman said, "I'm sick of all this talk about war. I'm sick of war. War is hell." He's like, "Screw it."
War is hell.
Yeah,
But,
that nailed it, kind of. I think.
Patton is actually a good movie. You know, Patton, because it gets both ways. You can kind of see it like, okay, this guy's crazy, or blood and guts. Yeah, his guts are blood.
And what a great performance in the middle of that. What a
Yeah,
special
yeah.
performance.
There's just, let's face it, it's the movies.
Yeah.
You know, violence and movies just have always gone great together.
It's just the best. And good guys and bad guys.
I know
you
it's so simple sometimes. And here, who are the bad guys? You don't even know. I guess you could look it up, but
The bad guys are the British destroyers. You know.
Picture of the destroyer through a periscope.
Yeah.
That's the bad, like, that's all you see.
the British. I mean, they're talking about the Brits as the
No, it's just a little triangle, in a circle.
guys they let drown that time.
Yeah, those bad guys, those villains.
The American Merchant Marine.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
And those U-boats were deadly. You know, I think I said before about Americans applauding. I told my dad about that phenomenon, and he goes, I would have applauded with him. He had an uncle who died in the war. He's like, those U-boats were deadly. Every time you opened the paper, they were just wiping out ships left and right. You know.
You could see oil tankers burning from the Jersey Shore at times during the war. I mean,
Right.
they were right offshore.
It was getting close there in the Atlantic.
So next week we're going to show we're show a movie next week called Cutter's Way, and then we take a week off for City of Las Americas, and then we're back with Fanny and Alexander, and then on into May, which starts with Rumblefish, which that was a spoiler because you saw the trailer.
Yeah.
But so
yeah.
Cutter and Bone.
Cutter and Bone.
Cutter's Way. I'm sorry.
The
novel's
book
Cutter and
is
Bone.
Cutter.
Yeah, right.
But I think was the movie called that for a while?
I think
or
it may have
something?
been, yeah.
So look forward to seeing that one again.
Yeah.
Been so long, you know. So that's just one of those solid, like, wow, you know, a great drama, great performances, as I remember. So
Great soundtrack.
yeah.
John Hurd and Jeff Bridges.
And Jeff Bridges,
And the lost John Hurd. What happened to John Hurd?
such a good, that's just, it's just a pretty gnarly performance, as I remember.
Yeah, it's
So, and that's one of those films that at that time, you know, it was a big deal when it came out, and then it kind of went into repertory for a few years. I remember seeing it a couple times in the early 80s, and then it just sort of disappeared. I don't know.
Was it
I
a
don't
big deal
think
when it
people
came out?
see it anymore. I don't know if it was, you know, your perspective is you went to see it when it was in the theater and you liked it a lot, so it was a big deal.
Yeah,
but
right.
for all I know, it grossed 5 cents.
Yeah, I think they kind of dumped it more or less.
Did they?
Yeah.
I just remember if myself and whatever film friends I had, if we all liked it, it was a big deal.
Yeah, well, it's a big deal
But,
again.
I don't think, maybe it feels like a movie people don't know anymore.
Yeah, no, it's a movie that
All the Jeff Bridges
everybody
fans in
says
the
they
world,
never
I don't
heard
know
of
if it's in that. I doubt anyone's asked him about it in 25, 30 years, probably.
Yeah, it's a really special, unusual kind of post-Vietnam disillusionment, and yeah, it's got a weird sense of humor, and it's It's made by a Czech director,
Yeah.
Ivan Passer,
Passer.
and so it has that weird kind of
Yeah.
Eastern European sense of humor that's odd in the way of observing Americans and their craziness. And
Yes.
yeah.
Just so curious to see again.
Yeah.
You know, I think,
So-
but I remember feeling, you know, it's like, boom, that's a damn good movie. You know, so
It's also like 89 minutes long, so that'll be
balance
nice
those
change.
out. Yeah, that'll be nice. But
Before we
anyway,
come back with
thanks so
Fanny
much for
Alexander.
sticking in there tonight. This was very special. It's a beautiful print too. I mean, this you're not going to get this again really too soon. I think.
Yeah,
nice
I'm not going to belabor this point, but 35 millimeter it's going away, and a few like heroic, let's face it, heroic people are still
Just
going through all the
fighting the
trouble and
fight.
difficulty and expense to make it happen
Yes.
and show it to you, so you can
Thank you.
soak it up for the past 5 years, the next 5 years or so, before it all really goes away, and it will eventually go away. So you have to enjoy it
We'll
while
be
you
sitting
can.
here going, I remember seeing a print of that movie way back when.
Yeah, now we're watching this bullshit.
I was like, well, it's clean. There's no marks. There's no, like, I love the real changes, you know. It gets
Yeah.
a little scratchy.
These real changes come out of nowhere. Some of them, it's like, oh, what? Okay, anyway, all right.
So,
Thanks a
anyway,
lot.
good
Thanks,
night.
Rick.